Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to thank the good chairman for the great questions and kind of laying the field, if you will. Many of the questions that I had were covered there, but I have a couple of clarifying questions. The first one related to the existing court case, or the prevailing related to the amendment to the compact. As I understand it, I think it was clarified that and in the testimony that the Secretary of the Interior has 45 days from submittal to essentially to reject the amendment or the revised compact, or is deemed approved, and that the step that didn't take place after that 45-day, which has passed, was to enter that into the Federal Register. And that, as I understand it, is the gist of the court cases being brought, is a summary judgment to force that to happen. And I would hope that, given the process and the many years of that would prevail. But should the federal judge not do that, and by practice it's deemed approved, what is the position of the tribes then? Are they going to proceed as if it's deemed approved, even though it didn't get in the Federal Register, or what is that trigger?
First, Representative France, the answer to your question is yes. As Chairman Butler stated earlier, we are underway and continuing with the design and moving towards financing. Second, I'd just like to reinforce our position that we are on the right side of the law in this matter, that it is a simple matter of procedure that the Department of Interior did not follow. And in addition to our current standing suit, the Connecticut delegation has initiated an investigation into why it was that the Interior made this no decision, which is an aberration from multiple previous cases of compacts being sent to BIA for approval. So there are a lot of eyes on this, asking the question, why is this the case? Meanwhile, to answer your question one more time, yes, we are continuing to proceed.
If I could, Representative France, and Chairman's being polite, we had full indication from Interior that they were going to approve, and in fact saw the preliminary letter that stated such literally 3 days prior to it being issued, and our friends across the way, and this is documented in public, actually met with members of Interior and the White House, and were able to influence that opinion, and that's why our friends in D.C. have now initiated an Investor General's investigation.
And on that point, I wasn't aware of an IG investigation. Do we know where that is, and whether it's been authorized, or they're still trying to pursue that?
No, we don't know the current status, but we will certainly circle back with our delegation.
It's ongoing, and the delegation
Inquiring the status is the last thing they told us.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I guess the only other really we touched on it was the existing legislation related to MGM that came through public safety at a hearing, and I think your legal counsel indicated that obviously you have to take a look at the final language, but there was a modification made to that. I think the initial language essentially would have voided the agreement that we came to as a legislature in the last session, and would replace it in fully with an RFP process, essentially, as I said, voiding what the actions of this legislature took, but then has since been modified to kind of run parallel, leaving intact the existing legislation, but opening up an RFP process. And I guess from a fundamental standpoint, what is your position on that modification, understanding the council's wise words to actually look at the final language, because we all know until it's actually passed out by both chambers, the committee process is just one part of it, and then ultimately signed by the governor, if it is to become law. The structure, if it was to be the way what came out of the committee, or is coming out of the committee, with leaving East Windsor intact but going to the RFP process, what is the position on the tribes of supporting that legislation or not?
Well, first off, despite the outcome, and it wasn't our preferred approach, we certainly appreciate the Public Safety Committee's effort to address the East Windsor concern. and continue to support us in that initiative as the legislature has done over the past 3 years. And so we certainly respect and appreciate that to try to balance both sides of the equation. That said, with that legislation removing East Windsor, prior to removing it, we were 100% against that legislation, and now we're probably 99% against that legislation. And so, and ultimately, as Bessie pointed out from a legal perspective, the ultimate outcome, and actually the chairman spoke to this in the beginning, at the onset, if the ultimate outcome is the same, it doesn't matter the process. My wife and I have been together for 23 years, right? Happily, incredible family. If I say to her, hey, babe, I'm going on a singles cruise just to, see how things are going to go, I mean, she's going to leave me before the cruise, right? I hope so, right? But certainly by the time I get back from that cruise, I should be packing my bags or not bring them back into the house. And so, I mean, that's the way that we're looking at this process. So, but again, I certainly appreciate the committee's attempt to recognize the relationship, and the committee has been great to us in that sense, and this legislature has been great to us in recognizing that partnership. And I think they were trying to thread that very tight needle, but as it's currently drafted, we just can't support it.
If I could just add, I've never made a threat to go on a singles cruise, but I'm not in a good situation, so that's a whole other matter. The math keeps getting missed in this whole conversation, and the fact of the matter is that while there are some who have followed the decline of the tax revenues that we've paid to the state of Connecticut and believe that in some way, shape, or form that's a matter of performance and that it's only going to get worse, it's a simple matter of the competition that is at stake here. And the East Windsor Casino helps us to level that out. The addition of another casino through an RFP process without going to a whiteboard and doing the X minus Y equals Z math of this whole thing, it really is, it's misdirection. There is no way that the market for a casino elsewhere in the state of Connecticut, which there are very few locations that anymore would make any sense, is going to succeed without displacing revenues in other places and be able to meet the tax rate of the 25% that we pay in slots and be a viable economic casino venture. The math just doesn't add up. And then to my earlier point, for some period of time after the threat of going on the singles cruise, the money's not going to flow. Once the commitment has been made, to your point, Representative Devlin, that there is a point in time at which there is a clear violation of the exclusivity agreement, and those revenues would be withheld.
Thank you for that perspective and clearly understand the position. And as soon as you bring up the revenue, I agree with the analysis that's been laid out here. I guess how I've tried to describe it, maybe you can assume, is that one of the contrary to manufacturing or other things where you're creating demand, that if you open another location, it's based on demand, that the gaming industry, particularly in a region, is essentially a fixed pie. It's one of the few industries that is that way. In the sense that if you open up another location, you're taking a slice out of that pie, which is to the point of the gaming revenue going down from an individual location if you open up another location. So, and as you, Chairman Brown, as you look through the effects of these, it is essentially for the last 3 years stabilized. And I would argue that that's two factors. One is there hasn't been another casino opened in the area to tap into that, and the second is the effect of the recession from 2007 has kind of leveled out into a more stable revenue stream. But as you point out, you open up another location with a relative fixed pie of revenue in a region, you're now that casino in this case is going to take a piece of that pie that now is going to the two casinos that you operate. Is that a fair analogy to your industry?
Generally speaking, it is. There's always the ability to generate new customers. That is always at play. But generally speaking, you're right that there's an equilibrium point here. that we are all fighting. This is a competition. I mean, and in fact, our competitor to the north in Springfield, MGM, outright stated, as they chose their market in Springfield, that their desire, their intent, was to go into the Connecticut market and attack. We are both competing for the same customer right now. That is just the state of play. That's life in business, and we recognize that and understand that. But remember, the reason we're having this collective partnered conversation with our state of Connecticut, ultimately that manifests itself in job loss and revenue loss, and that is something that we have a cooperative purpose to be focused on.
And just on the job loss point, you know, our legislation 3 years ago started with combating the loss of jobs, with the stealing of those jobs from Connecticut to Massachusetts, as Chairman Brown just pointed out. And it's mind-boggling at this point that that same entity that's stealing jobs from Connecticut and revenue from Connecticut, but in particular jobs, because I mean, this you guys understand the importance of jobs in this state and what it means to those families and the solid jobs that we provide. But that same entity is now pitting us against our friends within the state. And to shift jobs, we're not talking about create. I mean, the headlines that we're creating new jobs in Bridgeport, those aren't new jobs, right? We're shifting, you know, grains of sand on the beach here. It's the same beach that we're all on, and it's our beach, right? It's Connecticut and the two tribes and the opposition now coming in using that against us to split us apart, and quite frankly, they're doing it successfully because they've gotten this far, but that's not what's being said in all the arguments of all the new jobs, 2,000 jobs, permanent jobs, and 7,000 construction jobs. Those aren't new jobs, and it's putting friends at odds against each other, and it's very unfortunate.
Thank you for that. And one of the things that you try to look at in negotiation or any situation is you come from the do-nothing proposition, and I think that the report that was out that looked at that estimated, I believe it was around 6,000 direct jobs, anywhere from 4,000 to 12,000 indirect jobs, and somewhere in the neighborhood of around $100 million of revenue to the state reduction in the do-nothing proposition. And then the two tribes came together in this entity in East Windsor, and somewhere on the order, as I understand it, somewhere in the 4,000 job range and about $50 million plus or minus. And so you're stemming some of the outflow of jobs and revenue from the state of Connecticut. And I think one point that is lost, that's certainly the direct impact, indirect jobs, but the other part that is not talked about is that if in the do-nothing proposition, if nothing changed and East Windsor never opened, on top of that, you would lose income tax revenue from the people that live in northern Connecticut that go to work in Springfield. Even though Massachusetts has a priority clause of employment, there will be some number of people who live in Connecticut that then go work in Springfield at MGM. And on top of that, sales tax revenue, because we all know that we either buy generally where we live or where we work. And so people who buy in Massachusetts because they're getting things before they come home, we will lose sales tax revenue. None of that has been quantified. So that's an indeterminate amount of loss as well to the state of Connecticut, in addition to the gaming revenue that is a direct impact of that. So I think that needs to be understood, is that is what we're talking about here is in round numbers, and that is a significant impact to the state of Connecticut that for myself and in the region, certainly since both your casinos are in my district, I appreciate the relationship we've had. That is what needs to be understood. It's not just the jobs and the revenue, indirect and indirect. There's also these secondary and tertiary effects that go well beyond the substantial impact should nothing be done. So, thank you.